Every PlayStation generation explained in 8 minutes. The PS5 in your living room handles trillions of calculations per second, rendering massive open worlds with ray trace lighting without breaking a sweat. But 3 decades ago, Sony's entry into gaming started with a machine that read data off shiny plastic discs and struggled to render a 3D character with actual fingers. When people talk about the evolution of gaming, they aren't just talking about better graphics. Each PlayStation generation represents a massive shift in how games were made, how we played them, and how Sony accidentally conquered an industry. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how we went from blocky gray boxes to the modern era of home consoles, handhelds, and virtual reality. It all starts in 1994 with the original PlayStation. Fun piece of history most people forget. This console only exists because Nintendo backstabbed Sony. Sony was originally hired to build a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo, but Nintendo pulled out of the deal at the last minute. Sony's engineers were so furious that they decided to build their own console just to get revenge. And man, did they get it. Before the PS1, gaming was dominated by plastic cartridges. Sony swapped them for compact discs, or CDs. CDs were a massive game changer because they could hold roughly 450 times more data than a standard cartridge. Suddenly, games didn't just have primitive bleeps and bloops. They had full cinematic cutscenes, orchestral soundtracks, and actual voice acting. Using the PS1 was a completely new experience. There were no analog sticks on the first controller, just a D-pad. And memory? Built-in storage didn't exist. If you wanted to save your 40-hour RPG progress, you had to buy a separate 1 megabyte memory card. If you lost that tiny piece of plastic, your childhood progress was gone forever, which is probably why 90s kids have trust issues today. Despite blocky polygons and games loading so slowly you could go fix a sandwich mid-screen, the PS1 sold over 100 million units, proving that 3D gaming and discs were the future. If the first PlayStation was a success, the PlayStation 2, released in 2000, became an absolute titan. To this day, it remains the best-selling video game console of all time. With over 155 million units sold. The secret weapon wasn't just the games, it was the fact that it doubled as a cheap DVD player. In the year 2000, standalone DVD players cost hundreds of dollars. Sony bundled one inside a cutting-edge gaming console for $299. Parents who didn't care about video games bought it just to watch movies, and kids got a stealth gaming machine in the living room. Games during this era took a massive leap. We got the DualShock 2 controller with analog sticks, meaning characters could finally move smoothly in 360 degrees instead of walking like stiff robots. This era gave us masterpieces like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and massive open worlds. Riding high on the massive success of the PS2, Sony decided to challenge Nintendo's dominance in the handheld market. In 2004, they launched the PSP, or PlayStation Portable. This wasn't a weak, scaled-down handheld. It was essentially a pocket-sized PlayStation 2. It featured a gorgeous widescreen display and ran games off the proprietary Universal Media Discs, or UMDs. It even let you watch full-length Hollywood movies on the go. The PSP was a massive hit, selling over 80 million units and proving Sony could conquer the portable world too. But back in the living room, things were about to get bumpy. In 2006, Sony launched the PlayStation 3, and to put it bluntly, they got a bit arrogant. They launched the console at an eye-watering $599. Sony's engineers designed a highly complex architecture called the Cell Processor. It was incredibly powerful on paper, but a complete nightmare for developers to code for. Early multi-platform games often looked and ran worse on the PS3 than on the Xbox 360 because developers couldn't figure out how the brain of the machine worked. But the PS3 did bring us into the high-definition era. It introduced the Blu-ray drive, built-in Wi-Fi, and a free online gaming service called the PlayStation Network. It took Sony years of price cuts and legendary exclusive games like The Last of Us and Uncharted to finally catch up, turning a frustrating launch into a respectable finish. While fighting back with the PS3, Sony also prepared their next handheld. In 2011, they released the PlayStation Vita. The Vita was an absolute technical masterpiece. It had a stunning OLED touchscreen, a rear touchpad, and dual analog sticks that finally gave mobile gamers true console-like control. Unfortunately, despite its power, the Vita struggled due to expensive proprietary memory cards and fierce competition from smartphones, making it a beloved cult classic rather than a mainstream juggernaut. Learning from their past mistakes, Sony returned to simplicity for their next home console, releasing the PlayStation 4 in 2013. Instead of using weird experimental cell processors, they built the PS4 like a streamlined gaming PC. It was cheaper than its competitor, easier to develop for, and completely focused on one thing: games. This is the generation where gaming went fully social. The controller added a literal share button, allowing you to instantly upload clips or live stream your gameplay to the world. It was also the era of the transition to digital downloads and the introduction of mid-generation upgrades like the PS4 Pro to support early 4K TVs. Driven by unmatched exclusives like God of War and Spider-Man, the PS4 dominated its decade, but Sony wasn't done innovating in the PS4 era. In 2016, they jumped headfirst into virtual reality with the PlayStation VR. While PC VR setups required thousands of dollars and massive computer rigs, Sony made VR accessible to millions by letting players plug a headset sitting directly into their existing PS4, bringing a whole new level of immersion to the mainstream market. Which brings us to the current era, the PlayStation 5. If previous generations were defined by graphics getting sharper, the PS5 is defined by something invisible: speed. Sony swapped out traditional mechanical hard drives for a custom ultra-fast solid-state drive. Loading screens that used to take 45 seconds on a PS4 now take literally 2 seconds. You click, continue, and you are instantly in the game. The DualSense controller also added haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. If your character is walking through mud, the controller rumbles differently. If you pull back the string of a bow, the trigger button physically fights back against your finger to simulate tension. Sony expanded the ecosystem even further by introducing the PlayStation VR2, pushing high-end virtual reality with eye-tracking technology, and the PlayStation Portal, a dedicated remote play handheld that lets you stream your PS5 games anywhere in your house over Wi-Fi. And with the launch of the ultra-powerful PS5 Pro, pushing frame rates and fidelity even higher, this era is less about what computers can draw and more about how seamless and immersive the experience feels. Hit subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. I'll see you there.